chapter 2. 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. We found it, please stand for the review. About that? 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Some of y'all probably went straight there because you didn't open your Bible since last week. But there were also false prophets among the people, even as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the Lord who bought them, and bring on themselves swift destruction. And many will follow their destructive ways, because of whom the way of truth will be blasphemed. By covetousness, they will exploit you with deceptive words. For a long time, their judgment has not been idle, and their destruction does not slumber. You may be seated in our series, Preach, Peter, Preach. Now, when I did the sermon on yesterday, my title was, The Destroyer Comes. Something happened between the time that I did that and the time that I put the notes together for you. We're going to hope that it was a divine thing that took place. That God said, no, call this the gospel pimp. The gospel pimp. The reason for that title came to my mind. HBO did a documentary on pimps. And as I looked back into this lesson, I could see a parallel. Because Peter begins to talk about false teachers. And what I read and what I was studying reminded me so much of that documentary that I had to come back and say that there are those that actually pimp the gospel. That means that they're exploiting people for selfish gain. And they're actually using the gospel of Christ to do it. So I want to dive right into this lesson. You remember in chapter 1, Peter emphasized the need for spiritual growth to take place. He even said that though he was about to die, and he knew it, that he wanted to leave behind something that would help Christians to not only see the need for spiritual growth, but to grow by something. If you ever go back and read 1 Peter, interestingly enough, in chapter 2, in the very first verse, he talks about the fact that we need to lay aside malice, all kinds of things, and that we need to be like newborn babes and get on the pure milk of the word. And he emphasizes in chapter 1 that the word itself is even above any experience that we've had. But he's also identified a problem and an issue that confronts us about spiritual growth. And so when he gets to verse 1 of chapter 2, he uses the word but. He literally says, now, remember what I said, but let's wipe all that out because there's a problem that we have. He says, but there were also false prophets among the people. The words among the people, he's literally talking about Israel. And if you've ever read the Old Testament, you know that we had prophets, but the prophets were always running into false prophets. If you've been coming on Wednesday nights, you know that Jeremiah had that same issue. While he was running to tell the people that God's judgment was coming, that he had prophets that were coming behind him and before him, and they were saying, no, everything's fine. Everything's peaceful. Everything is okay. Nobody wants to hear bad news. They just don't. That's why I find it funny that people don't understand that if you have a true prophet, most likely what they're going to tell you is probably something bad. They always have something in there, though, for you. If you'll just stop doing this. If you'll just change. The Lord is holding back something if you'll change. But if you don't, this is what's going to happen. But I can even see today in our society, we don't want the truth. We like to be lied to. Remember Madam Cleo? People were calling Madam Cleo right and left. Do you think Madam Cleo ever told anybody something bad was going to happen? Who would pay for that? I don't want to know. But what she was doing was she was telling people everything's going to be all right. This is coming into your life. This is going to be good. We are a people that have ears that itch for what we determine to be good news. And good news always centers around us. It's always about me and what I'm going to get out of something. So he says there were also false prophets among the people. And when you look back in the Old Testament and you see what the false prophets were doing, they were paid to lie. Literally, paid to lie. One of them that he'll talk about later on in the chapter, he even got the word of God, had the truth. And then when he was told how much money he'd get for lying, went back to God and said, can I tell the lie? God said no. He went back to the people that were going to pay him. And the king said, I'll give you more money. He went back to God. Are you sure about this? Because money motivates. Eventually he decided, I'll just lie. I'll take the money. Y'all know the story. He was on a donkey. The donkey stopped and talked to him. He beat the donkey, but the donkey couldn't lie. We will do anything for money, is what this boils back down to. So he says, even as there will be false teachers among you, and among you is referring to Christians, it's referring to the church. So he warns here of, first of all, of a destructive doctrine that will permeate the church. Doctrine means teaching. There's going to be some teaching that will be destructive. It will be bad, and it will come from false teachers. The reason, as I was going through this, I remembered from that documentary that the pimp's number one tool was a lying mouth. And they admitted it. How do they exploit these women? We lie. One of them said, we just lie. We lie. They like the lies. That's their number one tool. And the false prophet's number one tool is his lying mouth. Lies to people. And we like to be lied to. Anybody here been lied to? You ever had a lie that makes you feel good? You never had a lie that makes you feel good? I have. Nobody ever told you you were the greatest thing since sliced bread? They were lying. That's just lying to you. I imagine every woman in here has been lied to and felt good about it. No, but that's later. At the point of the lie, though, he says, even as there will be false teachers among you. Notice the words among you. Among, in the midst. That's why the second part is so important. He says, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies. How do they secretly bring it in? Well, the way that they secretly bring it in, the Greek word literally means to come alongside in a private manner. How does someone get with you privately if he's talking about the church? That means that the church is being infiltrated. And how does the church get infiltrated? How in the world can somebody come in and say something that is private to the church, but is destructive to the church? Simple. They hide behind titles.